Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Community Development Partnerships Community Conversation. These are bi-monthly events that we in the past had held in person, and for the last almost 2 years now have been holding through video conference, an opportunity for us to engage with donors and supporters of the work that we do here at the CDP, and update you on different activities that are happening at the Community Development Partnership, and then of course focus on topic. And I'm pleased tonight that we have colleagues from the Cape Cod Commission who are going to share with us results of some recent surveys and studies that they've been doing with outreach to new homeowners and second homeowners on the Cape over the past year. But before I turn it over to Chloe and Chelsea, let me just give you a couple updates of some things that are happening at the CDP. I think many of you are aware that Representative Peake secured $1 million in funds to be shared between the Community Development Partnership and the Homeless Prevention Council to create a housing resource center and address the immediate and short-term housing needs on the lower and outer Cape. And we expect by the end of the month to be able to unveil a whole host of different services that we'll be offering with our partners at the Homeless Prevention Council. A significant part of that effort will be a resource center to assist homeowners with creating accessory dwelling units, particularly now that all of the towns have either passed or reformed accessory dwelling unit bylaws to make it easier for those to be constructed and made available for year-round rentals. And so the purpose of our program will be to work with homeowners to actually create those units in homes across the region. We're also working with two developers on two significant affordable housing projects on the Outer Cape. We have a partnership with Preservation of Affordable Housing to build 46 units of affordable housing in Wellfleet. That project is about to start moving forward with the application process, and we expect to submit a proposal to the Wellfleet Zoning Board in May of this year and go through that public hearing process. And then we are also serving as consultants with another nonprofit developer of affordable housing, the Community Builders, who will be building 65 units of affordable housing in Provincetown at the site of the old VFW building on Jerome Smith Road. And so that is not a formal partnership, but we're serving as consultants to assist the Community Builders with community engagement activities and building support in the town of Provincetown for that project. And then finally, yesterday, our Business and Credit Committee met to consider some loans from small businesses. And I just bring that up as just a reminder that the CDP has money to lend, and we are actively looking for small businesses that are either getting started or that are poised for growth, that are looking for loan funds. And more information on our lending program is on the CDP website. This is one of the oldest programs at the CDP, and we have helped over 200 businesses over the last 20 years and made over $3 million in loans to help small businesses start and grow. And we certainly are looking for opportunities to assist more entrepreneurs getting their businesses started here on the Cape. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Chloe Schaefer from the Cape Cod Commission, who's the chief planner, and her colleague, Chelsea, apologies if I'm butchering your name, Benau, help me with that? Benuna. Great, thank you, Chelsea, who's the community development planner at the Cape Cod Commission, to talk a bit how the COVID-19 pandemic is reshaping the way people are living and working. I think, we've observed that it's having profound effects on our local real estate market and on the ways in which second homeowners are utilizing their properties. And so the Commission has worked with the Donahue Institute at UMass Amherst, as well as the Center for Public Opinion at UMass Lowell, to survey new homeowners and second homeowners so that the region can get a better understanding of people's decisions to purchase a home here during the pandemic, as well as new and second homeowners' use of their homes during the pandemic and into the future. So the Commission staff are going to provide us with an overview of the results of these surveys. I think as we, certainly a lot of us have met people, and in fact, we have even at the CDP have two new colleagues who are people who moved to Cape Cod, one of them into their second home during the pandemic and are now full-time residents. And I think see if we've really got a significant trend going on here. So Chloe and Chelsea.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We're very pleased to be here tonight. As Jay mentioned, we are going to go over the results of two survey efforts we conducted in 2021. One focused on new homeowners and the other focused on second homeowners. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. Great, okay. So as Jay mentioned, I think, we all were either hearing or experiencing firsthand this feeling that there are certainly more people in the region during the pandemic, especially in the kind of off season and shoulder seasons than in years prior to the pandemic. And so we were trying to get a better understand some data points really of what was happening. So some other data sources that we had looked at, we've looked at change of address request information. This here is showing net permanent address change requests. So for people who move into the county, they request that their mailing address be changed permanently. And what we saw is in 2020, there was actually a net increase of over 2,000 requests compared to in 2019, where actually there were more, 178 more requests out of the county. Many of those people moving or making those requests were moving within the state as well as within the county, though certainly several were coming from outside as well. And you can see kind of those top states people were moving to Barnstable County from in 2020 there on the right. Another data point that Jay touched on is, of course, the real estate market. Like many places, we saw an increase in home prices during the pandemic. This here, the yellow line showing the median sales price for a single family home in the region by month. And then at the same time, the inventory of single family homes for sale is actually decreasing throughout that time as well. So these are certainly interesting and useful data points, but again, we wanted to really get some primary data as well to better understand in terms of those people who were buying homes in the region, kind of their intended plans for their use of their homes. And then given our large second homeowner population and second home stock, understanding if second homeowners were utilizing their homes differently during the pandemic as well. So I am first going to hand it over to Chelsea to walk through the results of our new homeowner survey.
Great, thank you, Chloe. So as Chloe mentioned, during the pandemic, as we began to see and hear anecdotally about changes in our population, we decided to work with UMass Donahue Institute to better understand these shifts and conduct a new homeowner survey. So we pulled a list of those who purchased a home between April 2020 and May 2021, which yielded about 6,800 home purchases during that time. And we mailed postcards to a random sample of 5,850. Here on this slide, you'll see an image of the postcard. And this mailing directed people to an online survey And we also sent a mail-in version of the survey later in the summer to capture additional responses. So we had a response of about 403 homeowners, and that gave us a response rate of about 6.9%. We had 336 surveys completed online and 67 were mailed in. So of the roughly 400 responses we received, we learned that about 2/3 plan to use their new property year-round. And then on this slide, we also have some basic demographic data about the new homeowners. So we learned that over 1/3 are over 65 years old, but when you add that to the age category right below it, we have over 2/3 that are over the age of 55. New homeowners also had relatively high household incomes, with more than half of households making over $150,000 per year. And they were also highly educated, with more than half having a graduate or professional degree. We also asked whether new homeowners or their immediate families had previously owned property on the Cape, and we learned that just over half had previously owned property on the Cape. And of those, many of them had been here for a relatively long time. 46% had owned property on the Cape for over 25 years. In terms of the type of housing that was purchased during this time by new homeowners, the majority of it was single family homes, reflecting the majority of housing stock on the Cape, and the remainder were mostly condominiums. The bar graph on this slide also shows the home purchase price, and we learned that more than half of new homeowners paid over $500,000 for their home. So given the rise in remote work during the pandemic, one of the areas that we were most curious to learn more about was the current and the predicted employment status and location of the new homeowners. So at the time of the survey, well, actually, we asked both whether about the status of employment at the time of purchase and at the time of the survey. So at the time of purchase, 70% of the respondents were employed and almost 1/3 were retired. But when we calculated for the shift between the time of purchase and the time of the survey, we found that an additional 7% had since retired, which brought the retired rate up to 38% at the time of, 36% at the time of surveying. In terms of work location, we found that nearly 70% of those employed work for an employer based off Cape. And 42% of the new homeowners reported that they were working fully remotely at the time of purchase. And that number was expected to lower to about 1/4 in the next 6 months. But we all know that that may not have ended up being the case. At the time of the survey, about 1/3 of employed new homeowners were working in a hybrid format, and that was expected to increase to 43% within 6 months. This bar graph shows the top industries that new homeowners were employed in. So we had the most popular response at 18% was professional and technical services, followed by 14% working in healthcare and social assistance, 13% in education services, 11% in finance and insurance, and 6% working in information, media, or telecommunications. We were also really interested to find out whether the circumstances of the pandemic influenced many new homeowners to purchase on Cape Cod during this time, or whether the timing was more of a coincidence. And we found that 35% of respondents were influenced by the pandemic to buy a home here. On the right, you'll see the results of the question that asks those that were influenced, what were the reasons that you decided to buy here during that time. And the top 3 were that they didn't need to live by their job anymore. Just over half responded that. And then that was followed by 44% that said increased proximity to outdoor recreation. And then about 1/4 said that more living space and a bigger home influenced their decision. We also asked all respondents, regardless of whether the pandemic influenced their decision to buy a home or not, what the most and least important factors were overall when making their decision to buy a home on Cape Cod. So on the left, you'll see the most important factors for new homeowners, which include access to the coast. 85% said that access to the coast was extremely or very important to them. And that was followed by outdoor recreational opportunities, where 76% said it was extremely or very important. And then 69% said that environmental quality and having a good place to retire were extremely or very important. On the flip side, on the right, you see the least important factors for new homeowners, which included school quality, a good place to raise children, and job or economic activity. The lack of importance of these factors may be related to the relatively high average age of new homeowners that we saw. This slide shows the most and least used public facilities by new homeowners. So on the left, again, the most used, and we learned that town beaches were by far the most popular. 85% of respondents said that they use them once a month or more, though many use them much more frequently than that. About half said they use them once a week or more. Conservation lands and parks were also very popular. 60% said they use them once a month or more. And then new homeowners also reported using libraries with relative frequency. About 3/4 said that they use libraries at least once a year, and 45% use them once a month or more. On the right, we see the least used public facilities, which included public transportation and senior centers or services. Around 80% of respondents said they never use these facilities or services. And then town boat landings and public golf courses were also not used at all by the majority of new homeowners, with around 60% responding that they never use these facilities. The results on this slide are from a question that we asked new homeowners about whether they use an on or off Cape vendor for private services. So the percent shown on this slide are based only on respondents that reported using these services. So on the left are statistics about healthcare. So we learned that about 3/4 of new homeowners use on-Cape providers for emergency or acute services, and about half use on-Cape primary care providers. But the numbers go down when we look at specialists, with the majority going off-Cape for specialists. For other professional services, most new homeowners reported using on-Cape providers for legal services, banking, and insurance services. But most go off Cape for accounting and investment services. And then at the bottom there, you'll see that only 10% of respondents use childcare services at all. But among those that do use childcare services, less than half use an on-Cape vendor. And we also asked, if you use an off-Cape vendor, why? And for those that reported using an off-Cape vendor, they said the most cited primary reason was that the respondent had already had a service provider based off Cape. This slide summarizes findings from the questions that we asked about broadband access and quality. So the 73% number shows that most new homeowners reported that their internet performs well. So they responded that their internet service allows them and others in their household to perform necessary tasks with few problems. 21% reported that their internet causes some problems for them or others in their household when trying to perform necessary tasks. And then 5% reported that their internet is inadequate for performing necessary tasks. We also learned that the vast majority of new homeowners, 95%, report accessing the internet through a fixed connection. And then the box below that shows the number of people in a household that are typically using the internet at once. So in about 3/4 of households, we have 1 to 2 people using the internet at the same time. And in most of the remainder, we have 3 to 4 people using the internet at the same time. So this slide shows the results of a question where we asked respondents to indicate various uses of their new home over the past year, over the next year, in 5 years, and in 20 years. So these percentages are aggregated to represent totals for each response, regardless of the timing that new homeowners indicated. So in other words, these numbers show whether they either have or would use their home in this way at some point in time. So for example, a respondent might have indicated that over the past year and for the next 5 years, they plan to use their home only as a second home for family. But in 20 years, they might plan to convert it to a primary residence. So because of the way this question worked, the numbers do not add to 100%. So with this in mind, these results show that the majority of new homeowners, 90%, either are already or plan to use their home as a primary residence at some point in time. Over half of new homeowners plan to hand their home down to family at some point, and about a third of respondents report intentions to use it as a second home for family only. We also see here that few new homeowners intend to use their home either as a year-round rental or as a full-time short-term rental. That's only 4% or 7% respectively. So that summarizes the results of our new homeowner survey. And now I will hand it over to Chloe to take you through the results of the second homeowner survey.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. So in a parallel effort, we did a targeted second homeowner survey to understand how second homeowners' use of their homes on the Cape might have been changing due to the pandemic. We had done 2 previous second homeowner surveys in 2008 and 2017 as well. And some of the questions in this survey are the same as those previous ones. And then there are certainly some that are more targeted towards changes during the pandemic. Similarly to the new homeowner survey, postcards were mailed directing people to an online survey of a list of nearly 63,000 second homes. 20,000 were mailed postcards. And in this case, it was just a single mailing. And in the end, we got over 900 survey responses. So 924 survey responses here. The vast majority of these second homeowners had owned their home in the region prior to April 1st, using that as a proxy essentially for prior to the pandemic. Similarly to the new homeowner survey, and I will say you're going to see a lot of the same kind of questions or data points here between the second homeowner survey and the new homeowner survey. But similarly, the respondents were older, with 58% actually being 65 years or older, only 11% reporting that they were under 55 years. Additionally, they were pretty wealthy, with 59% making $150,000 or more, and similarly had attained relatively high levels of education, with over 60% having a graduate or professional degree. Only about 26% of second homeowners or their immediate family had previously owned property on the Cape. However, of those that had owned it, over 70% had owned it for quite a while, at over 25 years. Again, kind of similar to our new homeowners, the vast majority, over 80% here, were single family homes. About 10% reported that they own their second home was a condominium, and some of the remainders were things like duplexes, or they might own a cottage in a cottage colony, that type of a thing. We also asked them whether they had inherited their second home, if it was a family home, or whether they'd purchased it. And 85% said they had purchased either the home or purchased land and then built their second home on it. And in terms of kind of where these homes were located, nearly 70% said they were located within a mile of the coast, and about half were within a mile of a pond. So really digging in here, though, to kind of the effects of the pandemic on second homeowners here, we asked them if the pandemic had influenced their use of their second home, and how so. And 44% of respondents said that they spent more time in their Cape Cod house than previous years due to the pandemic. And in fact, actually 5% said they spent more time in their Cape Cod second home than their primary home during the pandemic. And some of the main reasons or main kind of draws for them were lower rates of COVID-19 in the region compared to their area of primary residence. Their second home offered more living space. Again, that proximity to outdoor recreation was relatively high, but also for some of them, it was proximity to family and friends in the region, or living in a less dense area. We also dug into this a little bit more at a more granular level, asking them to tell us how many average days per month they use their second home, both in the years prior to the pandemic as well as during 2020 and 2021. And what we saw is that across all months of the year, they reported using their second home more during the pandemic than in previous years. The difference being less dramatic during July and August, and more pronounced during those off-season, shoulder season months, September, October, but kind of still following similar trends of February being the least utilized month and July being the highest. And kind of looking across the year as a whole, there was about a 30% increase in the average annual number of days that the second home was in use. And this was looking specifically at use by the owner, their family, or friends. Because we did also ask for those people who rented their second home, the number of days that it was rented out. And what we saw here is also that during the pandemic, for many months, primarily the off season and shoulder season, the number of days that it was rented out had actually increased. There was a slight decline during the pandemic for July and August, but still overall looking across the year, about a 15% increase in the annual average days rented during the pandemic compared to before. So in terms of use, while number of days of occupancy, whether by the homeowner, family and friends, or through renters had increased during the pandemic, occupancy was pretty similar during the pandemic as well compared to the years before. So that didn't seem to fluctuate too much, this being the number of people that were typically in the home when it was being used. We also wanted to understand certainly what their employment status was. Again, as Chelsea mentioned, especially kind of with the pandemic and new opportunities for remote work, trying to get a handle on how that might be a factor in people using their second homes in the region. Over half of second homeowners did note that they were retired, but 46% were employed. And of those employed, 78% had an off-tape employer, and about a fifth of them were actually self-employed. About a third were working remotely only at the time of the survey, which they was expected to go down as hybrid work was expected to increase over the next 6 months, kind of similar in trend to the new homeowner survey there. And in terms of the top industries for those employed second homeowners, some of these are similar to the new homeowners as well, with over 20% in professional and technical services, 14% in education services, followed by healthcare and finance and insurance. And then rounding out the top 5 there with 6% was real estate, rental, and leasing. So one of the questions that was unique to the second homeowner survey was understanding what actions some of them may have taken or were contemplating taking in terms of making their homes more energy efficient or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Nearly a quarter said they had installed energy saving appliances other than heat pumps. That was a separate category you can see there. 14% had said they installed them. Several noted that they'd composted or received weatherization assistance. Fewer reported using an electric vehicle or installing solar panels, but what was interesting is about a quarter in both cases noted that they were considering taking those actions. And then similarly to our new homeowner survey, we did want to understand for those of second homeowners who did decide to purchase their home in the region, what drew them here. The top reasons were very similar. Again, access to the coast being the first one, with over 90% indicating that that was extremely or very important to them as they decided to purchase their second home here. Kind of related to that, of course, is the outdoor recreational opportunities and then environmental quality. And then again, likely reflecting the older demographic of the second homeowners, school quality and being a good place to raise children were generally not at all important to them. And then also likely reflecting that many were retired, job or economic opportunities were over 80% indicated those were not at all important in their decision. And we also asked them about the public facilities they use while they're at their Cape home. Over 80%, again, town beaches were popular, over 80% saying they used it once a month or more. Over half use the town transfer stations, and over half also use conservation lands once a month or more. And in terms of kind of the least used public facilities while they're here, those were also pretty similar, many of them, to the new homeowners, with 87% never using public transportation or senior centers, and about 60% never using town boat landings or recreation programs. And then when we look at services that second homeowners might utilize and whether they use on-Cape or off-Cape vendors, for those who noted that they do use either construction or trade or repair or landscaping services, over 70% in all of those categories said they did use on-Cape vendors. Perhaps not surprising given the in-person interaction that's often needed with those types of services. But we did also ask as well, again, about professional services, and the top utilized on-Cape professional services were insurance and banking, with far fewer using accounting and investment services in the region. And then of those that responded that they do use emergency rooms or acute care centers, less than half said they were using on-Cape ones. Similarly, we wanted to understand the internet service that second homeowners had in the region. And these numbers track very closely to the new homeowners as well, with over 70% stating that essentially their internet service works for them. They can do what they need to with it. About a fifth said there's some problems, and 4% saying it was inadequate. 90% here, again, the vast majority accessing it through a fixed connection as opposed to something like a smartphone or a Wi-Fi network. And then about 2/3 only had 1 to 2 people using it simultaneously. And then finally, in terms of trying to understand how respondents have been and anticipate using their second home in the region, we asked a question similar to the new homeowner survey, again, asking them over the past year, over the next year, in 5 years, and in 20 years, how they anticipate using their second home. So at some point over that time period, over 30% said they'd be utilizing it as a primary residence. 79% said at some point they'd be using it solely as a second home for family. Far fewer reporting using it solely as either a short-term or a year-round rental. And then ultimately about half did anticipate, or over half anticipated at some point handing it down to a family member. So this was, I know, a lot of information. The reports are available on our website, but I did just want to quickly highlight that in the coming weeks, we will be launching a new Data Cape Cod website, and all of this survey data will soon be available on that website as well. Many of you may be familiar with our current Data Cape Cod website that was launched really early in the pandemic to help provide some regional data sets and information to support planning and recovery efforts. It's since kept evolving and growing, and in the coming weeks, we are looking at launching a kind of revamped Data Cape Cod. It'll be more extensive. This is just a little sneak peek at what it looks like. It'll have more data sets than what we currently have, and categorized in these buckets of people, places, and economy, as well as still having some of those COVID-19 specific resources. So just a little teaser there, but in the meantime, certainly would invite you to dig into the results and report on our reports for these surveys on our website. So thank you. With that, happy to try and answer any questions and any comments you may have.
Great, thank you, Chloe and Chelsea, for a lot there. So I'll kind of kick off with kind of some comments and questions and observations. If you do have a question you'd like to ask, feel free to use the raise hand function down at the bottom of your screen under reactions. Or the other option too is if you want to type a question in the chat, you can do that as well, and Jason will alert me when we've got questions in the chat. But I think certainly the data underscores kind of three things for me in terms of the work that we do at the CDP. The first is it really supports the idea that our housing unaffordability crisis is very much driven by the fact of the people who are buying homes and owning second homes really have nothing to do with our local economy in terms of the wages that they earn. If you looked at a majority of the homeowners are making over $150,000. That makes sense because that's kind of the income that you have to have in order to afford the median home price on the Cape. But it really does underscore the major disconnect that we have between the incomes of people who live and work here year round just are not sufficient to compete with second homeowners and retirees. The second kind of thing I was really interested to see is just looking at how second homeowners and new homeowners use local vendors and services, and that certainly there's great demand for construction, landscaping, those kinds of house maintenance services, and I think it really kind of supports something that we've identified and that is the need to really help those businesses grow, recruit employees, and really encourage more job training in the trades, if you will, because there continue to be job opportunities here. But then the second thing is I was really surprised to see is how most people are using in terms of like accounting, legal services, investment services, those kind of higher professional and even healthcare to a great extent, those higher wage professional jobs on the Cape that folks tend to be spending their money off Cape for those services, and perhaps that suggests an opportunity for growth and in local banking, local lawyers, healthcare providers to be able to go after some of that business. So that's kind of what I was really struck by with the data. Just thoughts, Chloe or Chelsea, kind of about those observations.
I think they were very interesting. I think certainly it perhaps makes a lot more sense for some of those second homeowners. They wouldn't be utilizing some of those on-Cape vendors for those things, given that this is their second home. And I guess, in my mind, I'd be curious to, in a perfect world, survey all the new homeowners again in 5 years and see if suddenly in 5 years, many more of them are utilizing local services, local vendors, if it's part of a transition or if it is more of a permanent pattern there.
Right. So other comments or questions that folks have about the data? Ella.
I am curious if there will be follow-up on, so I'm interested in the kind of community aspect of being a second homeowner or being a new resident. And something that stood out to me was that a lot of the folks who either own second homes or who bought homes are here for accessibility to the outdoors and to our beaches, but aren't concerned necessarily with larger community institutions like quality of schools or the local economy. And so there are these bigger community institutions that this newer group of people don't necessarily depend on or don't necessarily have to interact with. And I would be curious I would be curious to know more information about if they ever anticipate interacting with those institutions or how they feel like they fit into that bigger ecosystem on Cape.
That is unfortunately not something we asked, but something that I think, should we do this again, that would be a great kind of follow-up question to put in there, understanding if they aren't using these services, kind of why is that, and what would make them more inclined to. So I think
Or
that's a great point.
even if they see them, since some of those services are being financed with their property taxes, do they see value to the community and the broader attractiveness of the community? I think one of the things that as we kind of look at, particularly on the outer Cape, where second home ownership rates exceed 50%, that I think that has concerned a lot of us in terms of how do you maintain a healthy year-round community, and that healthy year-round community, I think, actually adds value to the real estate investment of many of these folks. But I'm not really sure that we see that folks, second homeowners and retirees, are necessarily making that connection, and that I think that is both an opportunity and a threat if we're doing a SWOT analysis on all of this. Maggie, you had your hand up, and then Ward.
Yes. Hi, thanks for all this information. It is a lot. And my question is, of both groups, do you know what the dispersion of the responses were across towns? Were they sort of proportionate or disproportionately concentrated in certain towns? And also, I was wondering if, especially for the new homeowner surveys, if there were any questions asked regarding race or other demographics, and also probably not, but the race or other demographics of the sellers of the homes.
Sure. So, sorry, Chelsea.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I can just start off by saying that we do have a lot of the data grouped by subregion. So most of the questions we don't have at the town level, but we do have at the subregional level. And when our report is posted, that data at that level should be available for you to explore. And we did ask about race and other demographic information for both new and second homeowners. So that will also be available, but we do not have it for the sellers.
And do you have a sense, Chelsea, if at least geographically and then other demographic characteristics, is the sample pretty representative, or particular subregions of the Cape overrepresented?
Yes, we looked before presenting today at whether there were any major statistically significant differences across the subregions that we could point out, knowing that you all are interested in the lower and outer Cape specifically. And in the new homeowners, at least, we didn't have much to highlight. It was pretty evenly spread. But Chloe, did you see anything different?
There were some in the second homeowners, or just kind of some interesting things. I'm thinking one thing that stood out to me was the lower Cape. I think is 71% said the historic character of the Cape was like very important to them in deciding to purchase a home here, whereas it was lower overall as a region. But also these surveys were meant to be conducted in a way that is representative kind of new homeowners and second homeowners on the whole, and designed in that sense. And so to that end, UMass Donahue, there's the statisticians here, they did do weighting and whatnot to come up with the results, so that they were largely representative, is my understanding.
Ward.
Thanks. That gets closer to one of my questions. Is it possible to isolate a group and then look at this profile based on that? For example, I know there were not a lot of younger home buyers, but what did the younger home buyers look for and like? And I know most people wanted to live, overlooking water in a pond or a beach. But what attracted people who did not or could not live close to the water? Is it possible to do that kind of extra level of digging?
Certainly, yes. So I think there's probably an infinite number of combinations or ways we could look at this data. And one of the things, to be honest, like I think I'm still digesting it myself at this kind of higher level that we've presented, but then it's great to hear from other people what they would be interested in seeing. And I think certainly that would be a great thing to look into, is of those younger home buyers, kind of what drew them to the region, and where were they coming from, as kind of perhaps a more unique subset of the home buyers than your average one. So I don't have those numbers for you right now, Ward, but I think that's a great thing we could look into.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Ward?
Well, I was just going to thank her and also say, that you could even put both of those together. Is this possible through your data set online, or is this something that we have to go through UMass Donahue, or you'll figure out good questions to tease out?
If you have specific questions, please feel free to email us, and we can figure out kind of how to address that. I think some of these things will come out as we dig into the data more, and we'll probably get posted online. But if we don't put what you are looking for up there, just send us an email and we can see if we can figure that out. So
Thank you.
Mary Kay, Leonard put in the chat, wondering if there are additional uses of community institutions that would make new and second homeowners feel more part of the community. And noted, the data showed that many use libraries. And is there a way to build off of that, perhaps? Mary Kay, do you want to say more?
Well, I was just trying to think about, you could think about the negatives. Maybe they, won't want to support the schools, but like Jay said, I mean, I probably think they do. But I'm just trying to think about over time, if there are ways to continue any of this survey, to understand as people spend more time here, they probably are going to want to connect in some ways, serving on boards, potentially. The senior centers as we know them might not be, somebody's only 65, they might not think they can go there. But if they knew there were a whole bunch of pickleball courts, they might. I mean, I'm just trying to think about your point, Ella. How do you give people a little bit more sense of the community by finding out where they are and meet them there, as opposed to saying, these are our community institutions, you need to be a part of them? Because they're not going to be a part of the schools, but hopefully they'll feel like, yeah, that's my obligation. Well, I am one of those people, to support the schools and make sure they're good. But what else where else might I connect? And I don't know what the answer is. It was really a question. Which nobody has to answer, but just food for thought.
I was just, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that I think the response that I saw wasn't so much that they didn't support the schools, it's just that they wouldn't have use of the schools. But what's interesting is that, let's see, the new homeowner survey, well, I think both of them probably both indicated a little over half plan to hand them down to family, which might mean younger households, which would have an interest in the school systems. So
So
that
what-
might be something to look at.
Yeah. So Joseph Galletti asks, how is this going to be integrated into the Cape Cod Commission's regional policy plan? I believe that was just completed 2 years ago, Chloe, and when is the next one due? But you know, how can this data kind of inform the work of the commission?
Certainly. So I think, yeah, this was data we were very keen to get a better understanding of just how much we were actually really, the changes we were all feeling and seeing, kind of understanding some numbers behind that. And I think that'll be really important to understand kind of how things have changed in the past couple of years as we look to any future planning efforts. Additionally, I think something that I think is important that's kind of coming out of this conversation tonight is honing in on some of those other questions that we would like to tease out from some of this data and understanding how we might focus in on some different efforts there. Again, as Ward was mentioning, looking at younger homeowners, trying to understand kind of the dynamics there. So I think it'll be very interesting. It is, of course, also a snapshot in time. So I think a follow-up, you know, in a few years will also be important to understand whether these trends were long-term or more of a pandemic bubble type thing, if you will.
Mary Kay?
Yeah, I'm not a statistician, so I couldn't quite tell. Are there enough people, new homeowners or second homeowners, you know, spread across the Cape that we really care? I mean, that they really change, you know, your strategic plan or CDP's planning. I mean, it's what I'm trying to figure out. It's interesting, but is there enough that we need to actually try to respond to it and take some action? Or begin to think about it anyway.
I can let Jay speak certainly to the CDP part, but it does range a lot from community to community on the Cape, especially those on the Upper Cape are much less seasonal. I want to say some of them are more around like 18% seasonal homes, although don't quote me on that, that's from memory at the moment, but ranging to really the majority of homes in some communities on the Outer Cape. And the region as a whole, I believe, is over a third of seasonal homes. And that's a lot compared to many kind of your more typical communities throughout. So it's certainly like a more unique aspect of the region when we think about kind of everything that we're doing, I think. Okay.
So it's almost 6 o'clock. One more question from Jill.
Sure. Thank you, Jay. And I'm sorry, I was coming from another meeting, so I came on after a little bit into the meeting. But I just had a question around, there was one line about short-term rental only, as well as second home. Was there anything looked at for folks who were using a property as a second home part year, as well as short-term rental, and using both of those?
So I'm trying to look up the specific language, but there was also an option where they could say that they were using it both as a second home as well as a short-term rental, some combination of that. They could say whether they had been using it that way or anticipated using it that way in the future.
I think it might definitely be interesting to kind of tease some of that out for the Lower and Outer Cape, for sure. Well, Chloe and Chelsea, I really want to thank you very much for tonight's presentation. If folks want to get a copy of your presentation, can they email you at the commission, or maybe we can we'll follow up with an email to folks who signed up tonight with how to get copies of the presentations. To share with others, and a recording of this community conversation will be available with the links on our website to our YouTube channel where you can not only find past community conversations, but also sessions from our Affordable Housing Institute. Have also been recorded in the fall and winter and are available there as well. I want to thank Nina and Jason for my colleagues at the CDP for organizing the event tonight. Thank you all so much for participating. We will have another community conversation scheduled in a couple months in April, and a topic to be determined. And we look forward to seeing you again there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
Thank you guys. This is super useful and interesting data. I'm excited to dig into it more.